Matthew chapter number 20. Matthew 20. And we're going to look at another parable in some of our parable teachings. Matthew 20, and we're going to look at verses 1 through 16. Now, the parables, we know, are all about things that go side by side. Normally, we associate a parable with a heavenly truth clothed in earthly story. Sometimes we'll associate a parable as dealing with a paralleling of sorts. And in this case, there is no difference here. There is a definite parable dealing with how the kingdom of heaven is. And we understand that the kingdom of heaven is the church. There's no discrepancy there between the kingdom now and the one to come. It's all the church. There's no other way it could be interpreted, in my opinion, according to Matthew 16, 18, 19. When you look at Matthew 20, though, as Jesus here is dealing with a specific kind of mentality. And so it really begins in Matthew 19, verse 27, where Peter answered and said to him, "See, we have left all and followed you. Therefore, what shall we have?" Now, that may be the basis for Matthew 20, verses 1 through 16, because now it's all about, now that we've left everything, now that we've been out here in the fields working, what do we have left to do? How much more is required of us? And so now Jesus is going to explain to him, as well as the other disciples, this parable. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read all the verses all at one time, and we're going to go back through the text, okay? So, for the kingdom of heaven, Matthew 20, verse 1, is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. Now, when he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And he went out about the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right I will give you." So they went. Again, he went out about the 6th and the 9th hour, and did likewise. And at the 11th hour, he went out and found others standing idle, and said to them, "Why have you been standing here idle all day?" And they said to him, "Because no one hired us." And so he said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right you will receive." So when evening had come, the owner of the vineyard said to his steward, "Call the laborers and give them their wages, beginning with the last to the first." And when those came who were hired about the 11th hour, they each received a denarius. But when the first came, they supposed that they would receive more, and they likewise received such a denarius. And when they had received it, they complained against the landowner, saying, "These last men have worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden and the heat of the day." But he answered one of them and said, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what is yours and go your way. I wish to give to the last man the same as to you. Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with my own things? Or is your eye evil because I am good?" So the last will be first, and the first last. For many are called, but few chosen. Now, there are two scenes here. The first scene is verses 1 through 7. And that's, you could kind of look at that as the kind of like the morning scene. He went out around 6 a.m., 9 a.m. to noon. And then verse 8 through 16 goes into more of the evening scene. And then that's where at the about 3 o'clock, and normally these work days are around 10-hour work days. So when someone's going in 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you're done around 3, 4, 5 o'clock, you only have 1 more hour left to work, and you're getting paid 12 times what you were what the first guy at 6 a.m. was paid, of course, there's going to be some issues there. And so there is two major issues that have been raised from the man, from one of the men anyways. He says, no, we've put in the work. We've been out here in the heat of the day. Why do they get paid the full amount when they have been over here for an hour or two? And so obviously the answer, he dealt with it in a legal sense as well as in a moral sense. And that's why he says, number one, did these individuals know what they're going to get paid at the beginning? Yes? Yes? Everyone agree with yes? All right. Verse 2. It's in the text itself. It says, and they agreed upon this. And then you see it again in verse number 7, as in verse number 8. It says, that give them their wages, beginning with the last to the first. And so they each received a denarius, verse number 9. Verse 2, though, they each agreed with the laborers. Now, he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius a day. Now, I did a little bit of background work on this denarius business. Let me get my notes over here. This page. It is. And a denarius would buy about 4.5 pounds of wheat, which would feed an average person for about 10 days. One denarius might also purchase about 40 liters of olive oil or 190 to 640 figs, depending on whether these items were plentiful or scarce. Also, a denarius could feed a family of 2 adults with probably a minimum of 4 kids for 3 to 6 days on average. And of course, part of a day's wage would also have to go to a laborer's tax. Now, here's the craziest thing. The tax rate, according to historical evidence, at this point in time was 28%. That's pretty high. So they had to pay a 28% laborer's tax on top of what they made. So I thought that was interesting. That's really why I did this. I thought that's pretty high. Anyway, so these guys have agreed on it. You see how valuable a denarius was and why everyone would be so willing to jump onto it and say, I want to do it for this amount of money. And so obviously we have the system here. Now, who is going out and doing I won't say doing the work, but who's going out first and finding people to do the work? Here we go. The landowner. Yeah. Now, from an allegorical sense, who do you think the landowner represents? God. Yeah. That is the very, very typical way to interpret this section, is that while we may be idle ourselves, God is always working, and God is always interested in finding more and more people. Now, of course, with this situation, and the landowner is going through different people, and he finds some that are ready to go the first time, 6 a.m. They're in the marketplace. That would be in what's called the agora. That's where everything happened. That was where you had shops and businesses and commerce. It's kind of like Home Depot for them, I guess, in the middle of town. Everything you want, and Walmart's kind of all there with it. You go there to find anyone you want to come work with you for the day. I know that depending on who you look at for your references here, some would say that these guys were hired in for 24 hours. The typical hired servant could negotiate a contract for about 6 years on average with his employer. And it's interesting here that some have tried to make this a social justice deal, which is really funny. About the unions get involved here, where the unions get involved on behalf of the first 3 guys, not the 4th guy. That's like Christ isn't going in here trying to do a social justice type deal. He's trying to explain about God's grace. He's trying to elaborate more about the importance of God's grace is for everybody, no matter when you begin the journey. And so that's the general gist of the parable anyway. But when you look at the verses here, there's, let me find my note here. All right. Verse number 8 comes into effect. And it says, so when evening had come, the owner of the vineyard said to his steward, call the laborers and give them their wages, beginning with the last to the first. The parable contrasts God's mercy with the stinginess of those who oppose mercy. It was very typical from Leviticus 19, verse 13, and Deuteronomy 24, verse 14 and 15, that at the end of the day, according to the law of Moses, they would pay their wages in the evening. So there is nothing unusual here about the time of payment. But also you see in verse number 10, it says when they first came, they supposed that they would receive more. That's now dealing with the injustice. This one man has been given an injustice. And so they supposed that they would receive more, and they likewise received each an denarius. And when they received it, they complained against the landowner. And so verse 10 comes into what's called the mercenary spirit. He's a calculating one. He's thought this thing through. And it's interesting here that this was also typical with the disciples themselves, because Peter himself had a similar spirit there in in Matthew 19, verse 27. The brothers James and John also thought about this when they went to Jesus, and they maybe through their mom. But either way, it's for someone's request to see who could be the most, who could be on the right and on the left hand of the kingdom. And so they were calculating this thing. Whenever Mary broke the alabaster box, there was a discussion about, that she could have given all that money to the poor. Someone calculated that thing. And so instead they said, Christ said, she's given me more than what this thing was ever worth. I'm paraphrasing there, because she's given me, in a sense, early burial rights. And so therefore don't harm her at all. But it's interesting here that when you look at verse 13, though, so when there's complaining happening, and there's obviously some problematic, perhaps injustice, do you realize did you catch how he talked to the complainer? What did he call him? In verse 13. Friend. Would you ever call a complainer your friend? You call him your friend? Normally, you might do that after you've agreed on something. Yeah.
Because you have a character to the whole, because you are the benefactor of the wages, in other words. And see, okay, if you look at that verse, he took them back to where they started working with this, you, with me, on a day's wage. Okay, I'm reading that.
You're good.
But see, too, if you look at that, another thing that would come into play, where it took it all the way back to that scripture you started with, what are we going to get out of this? Okay. Some of the people who have been there all day, that was the first thing they brought up. We've been out here, we've been laboring in the sun, we did this. This guy didn't work but an hour. This guy didn't work but 2 hours. See, they wanted to contrast the amount of time when they wouldn't get paid by the hour. They would get paid by the days.
By the job. Yeah. Yeah.
And see, that's what convicted them. These people came in and got paid the same thing. And then another thing, they had to wait longer to get paid because they paid them first.
That's
So
true.
it was a whole lot, would you say, confusion in that behind the way they might have taken that from the personal standpoint.
Yeah.
And that would cause him to have to tell them, you know, I'm not treating you with respect. And he told them what they did. Didn't you agree with me? That's the key there.
Right.
You agreed before I even let you go to my field, what this amount.
That's true. That's verse 2.
You agreed with this amount.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like everybody else that's working with me, they agree for that same amount.
Right. 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 And yeah, it's a great point. And they did agree. And so I did find this. Maybe it's next page. It's at the end. Here we go. At the end. Knew it. That, you know, God doesn't bargain with us. Yeah. Yeah. So God doesn't make a contract with us. You know, you do this and I'll serve you or you serve me. But rather God makes a covenant in which he promises us everything, asks us everything in return. And so when he keeps his promises, and we also will keep our faithfulness to him, even though sometimes we struggle with this, but it comes down to this is, in this sense, a landowner's natural, overflowing, generous nature. So that was all about him. All right. Yeah, good. Good comment. Now, so he mentioned him and called him his friend. And there are 3 times in the Gospel of Matthew when the term friend is used. This one is number 1. The second one is Matthew 22. Let me look at 22, verse number 12. Can somebody read that for us? Matthew 22, verse number 12.
And he said unto them, friends, how canst thou do it, not having a wedding garment? And he was
All right. Now, contextually, this is dealing with the chief priests and Pharisees, verse 45 and 21. Then he also answered back unto them by parables, saying, and then it says the wedding feast parable. And so inside of this parable is the king speaking. Now, next time you see the word friend is in Matthew 26, verse number 50. Can somebody read that for us? Matthew 26, verse number 50. All right. So who's that talking about, do you think? Judas. There we go. All right. So when you look at each time the word friend, anyways, each time is from someone superior role. Okay. Obviously, in this situation, in Matthew 20, for a parable, it's a landowner to this man who's complaining. Secondly, you deal with the king talking to the servants there in Matthew 22, and now you're dealing with Jesus to Judas. So it's interesting here that he's dealing with this friend terminology. And in fact, when he deals with it as friend, it would seem to be that he's using it as a form of shame upon somebody else. Kind of like, don't you know any better? In that kind of a sense. Don't you understand what you kind of entered into? Don't you understand what's happening now? And so it's kind of used in a sense to try to, it would seem to kind of trigger them a little bit. What you got, Crystal?
I think the term friend in both instances is more of like a respectfully modern term.
Yeah.
How you use respectfully. Why did you do that? Because even though I'm in a superior stand, I don't want you to feel as if I'm belittling you by asking you this question. But it's like trying to make their wheels turn, like to think, but without just being like, belittling.
Mm-hmm.
Common sense would tell you that I could wish and do what I want to do with my money and pay them what I want to pay them because I'm the boss. But instead of coming out arrogant and coming out that way, kind of like respectfully, you already had agreed to work all day, so whether they came 30 minutes, 3 hours, it wouldn't really matter because you and I already came into an agreement.
Right. Right. Yes. Yes. Definitely. What you got?
For the 15, when you answer it, you tell them. If that's what you look at it, the King James, it says, can I do what I want with my own money? Or do you resent me my generosity toward others? That's basically like you admitted it too, when you talk about how you generous. See, that's the point. Sometimes you have people, they don't have no control over what's going on other than the work that needs to be done, and they've agreed to do it. And you have people that's doing the work, and they'll be complaining because it's something they may not like that's going on. And they don't even have the authority to even complain because it's not only them doing the work, they got everybody else there doing that work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, it is interesting that when you look at the parable a little bit more, a denarius is attached to every other group except the last group. Did y'all catch that? Every other group has said, come work for me for a denarius, but the last one, there's no mention of money. So imagine they're surprised when they see what they got, you know? But yet, and then that's where you're going at here, is that he says, I'm going to give you what I feel like is right. And that's the key there, because they were thinking in terms of fairness. He's saying, I'm thinking in terms of being right with you.
Yeah, he's right. You and everybody.
Yeah.
Here, I'm not thinking about it. You know? And then that's concerning the fact that all he was really concerned with was getting the work done.
Right.
And then he felt like he was already ready. And he had a conscience because he didn't just hire them. He asked them if they agreed to work for that money.
Right. Good. What you got?
Another thing is that they're not even taking into consideration, so it's kind of like, you're complaining about something that you don't see. This is why you have to focus on what you have going on and not somebody else, because you don't see the bigger picture. So he asked them, the ones that came at the 11th hour, why have you been standing here idle all day? They've been standing there all day. So yeah, they haven't been working, yeah, they haven't, but they're standing there in hope that somebody's gonna come and even hire them on the last hour, last 30 minutes. That's something that the other workers, because they were so busy working and doing their own thing, they weren't paying attention to that. So here he comes, he's also, okay, that didn't work, but he's taking into consideration, they stood there all day, they could have went home, they could have done something else, but because they stood there all day in hopes that somebody hired them and somebody didn't, let me hire them, and then I'm gonna give them what I feel for. Well, you're standing in the heat all day, I mean, so that's another thing, it's kind of like a lesson for people that, focus on the lessons and the things that you have going on, because you want to see the full picture. You just see what is in front of you, and then let God determine what portion he's going to give to everybody else, because he sees the full picture.
Right. Yeah. Great point. And and that is a very valid point, because we don't know why they were there all day. Were they too old? Maybe they had disabilities. Maybe they were the wrong race. Maybe they were Jew. They were Gentiles, not Jews type thing.
I didn't get up early.
Maybe.
How many things you can read into that?
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff you look into it. Because typical working age in this time frame was 25 to 35, and so they could have been some age thing. They've gone past their prime. We don't know what made them stay away from the field. We don't know. But it is interesting that he came back seemingly for the undesirables to go get them. And so from that standpoint, a few ways to interpret this parable are dealing with, I think the normal one that we might associate with may be just the church kind of getting in Some have said this might be kind of like a Jewish Christian thing with a Gentile Christian. The ones come in later, and because they're Gentiles by their birth, therefore they're not as holy as a Jewish one who came in, say on Pentecost, whenever they came in. Other suggestions are dealing with, this is generally just dealing with the actual Jew and Gentile demarcation. Maybe. Either way, it doesn't change the fact of the matter of the parable, does it? Either way, the ones come in later, so we get the same benefits as the ones that were there all day. And so that's the general gist of it. But it's interesting there that I think from the undesirable standpoint, it could be more of the Gentile thing, that they were seen as the dirty dogs, you unholy, pagan, worldly-minded individuals. How dare you think you can come in here and try to, get benefits of this great place. So, good observation. All right. Now, verse 16 is really the commentary on the whole section. But let's see. Verse 15, though, really quick. When you look at this, which I find to be an interesting little side note section here, back in Matthew 20, when my verses down here. All right, says, is it not lawful for me to do what I wish? This is laying on now to the complainer with my own things, or is your eye evil because I am good? A few things about this verse that may be of interest is the evil eye. What kind of an eye do you think that he's talking about? There's two main ways this same Greek word is used inside of your Bibles. The first one is that of general stinginess. Okay? He's generally very stingy. The second way this is used is the idea of envy. I think either one fits the verse very nicely. But the second thing here is how does the landowner describe himself? He's good. That's phenomenal, isn't it? Now, from earlier in I think Matthew 19, where there he is, verse number 17. Well, verse 16 really dealing with the how Christ counsels the young man. It says, now behold, Matthew 19, verse 16. Now behold, one came and said to him, good teacher, what good thing shall I do that I may have eternal life? And so he said to him, why do you call me good? No one is good but one, that is God. But if you want to enter into life, keep the commandments. Now, the idea here of good, and then this verse in Matthew 20, verse 15, that's the same word. And obviously, we're dealing with intrinsic goodness. It's who he is by his very nature, essence. He is good. But also, another synonym here for the word good is the word generous. So who is, in this situation, the most generous of the whole bunch? The landowner is. Okay? It'd be God. And then you look at other verses like James 1:17, where it says, every good and perfect gift come down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no shadow of variation of turning. Yes. Very nice. All right. And perfect there is an interesting word too. But anyway, I still with trials, I think. Is that perfect? Anyway, good. All right. And so, when he's looking at this, because I am good, well, What would you say to that? Would you question another man's goodness? You probably think that guy's kind of crazy if it was just normal behavior, wouldn't it? You think this guy's self-righteous. He's calling himself good. But yet, we see that he established his goodness by his rightness. He says, I was fair with you. I gave you what I agreed on with you. I did what was right. I did everything out of my own things for you. I did everything out of this. Therefore, based upon this, therefore there is goodness because I'm dealing with you in a right way. And he understands that this is dealing with it in a very fair, right manner, in spite of what they may want to suggest otherwise. I'll get you. Go ahead.
Okay. You go back to the people he hired first, and then doing those that in the morning, they agreed to the wages before they went to the field.
Yeah.
The people he hired in the evening didn't even worry about the wages. They just decided they wanted to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was another contract that came in. The ones that went in early, they agreed to the wages. These other ones just willingly went to work,
Right.
not worried about the wages.
That's true. That's a fair point. Fair point. What you got, Craig?
Do you think he escalated the situation when he called on prayer?
I don't know.
It looked like he was trying to get hostile with him.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you look at it from the standpoint of the superiority thing, it wouldn't surprise me if that's him trying to put him to his place. Yeah, yeah. All right. Now, and seeing all this, there are some interesting things here that I was trying to get us to, because I found this very interesting. Is this parable may sound like another parable that Christ's already spoken about? Do you think that sounds like another one that we've already kind of gone through and you've read over and over again many, many years, I'm sure? This one has similarities to one other parable. What's your guess?
Well, I don't know, like the one that's been coming to mind while we talked about it is kind of like the two sons.
All right, the prodigal son. There he is. All right, man, you good? Look at that. So, when you look at the prodigal son, there is, and that's why I have a little table here. Look at that. Not original with me, but I found it. I thought it was pretty good. When you look at, of course, the prodigal son, in Luke 15 and Matthew 20, verse 1 through 16 here. Of course, in this section here, we have a generous employer. Inside Luke 15, you have a generous father. Of course, you have workers hired late and workers hired early. And the prodigal son parable, you have, of course, prodigal son, and then the other son or the elder brother. Both groups had unexpected generosity shown toward those, and in this case, one of those who were hired late, and the father toward his prodigal son. The workers first hired had resentful, complaining attitudes of injustice. The elder brother had a complaining, resentful attitude of injustice. And yet, both times, the employer, and in this case, the employer in this case, and then the father in Luke 15, justifies his extravagant generosity. Now, it's interesting that, and I was looking at this thing, that I've never clicked on this one about the prodigal son, but when the son went to the father in Luke 15, and he said, give me what I'm owed, and give me my inheritance, that's him saying, I wish you were dead. You believe that? I wish you were dead. And it's interesting here that part of the evil eye mentality, when you follow the logic through, according to your scripture, it's all dealing with how somebody wishes harm upon, in this situation, the landowner because he's being overly generous. And so there's another similarity mentioned there a little bit. This man has his life being threatened in a sense. He knows it, but yet he's saying, because this is the right thing to do, I'm going to follow through with it. And so you see that right there. Now we know in Luke 15 that, the elder brother, he figured, the younger brother doesn't have to, he doesn't have anything. He left everything behind. What are you doing for him? And so there's some similarities there. Now, very good. Y'all see any other similarities there between the prodigal son parable in Luke 15 and this one here in Matthew 20? Anything else pops out to you? What you got?
The son that had his way, like you say, he was impatient, he considered all that. I don't want to wait for you to die, I need my inheritance.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
He didn't have it to him like that. He didn't really, and then for him to, and then he realized after he left and started living the way he wanted to live, instead of in the comfort of what he already had with his dad, is when he realized, I made a big mistake.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, and another thing there, his father didn't have to respond like he did when he returned.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. That's very true. That's very true.
So see, basically you can see how through the generosity and the care the father had for his son, from that parable, you can kind of see what he was trying to explain. God is going to always, that's how God does us. God is going to always be there to care for us, regardless of how bad we do, or how put down we take ourselves, or how low we get.
Yeah.
He'll always be there for us to come back to. We just got to have the courage to do that.
Right.
And he's not going to deny us then. Like this thing, if it was repeat, he's not going to deny you.
Right. Right. What you get, Rick?
Somebody had mentioned fairness.
Yeah.
Well, the prodigal son's brother didn't think for his dad it was fair,
That's true.
right? And this, the workers that started early, read early, were, they didn't think it was fair, they didn't get more.
Mhm.
So, the question comes down to who has the authority
That's true.
to determine what's fair and what's not fair. With your children, it comes up all the time. And who's the arbitrator? The parent is the arbitrator.
That's true.
That's not fair. It may not seem fair to you, but I judge that what I have is fair.
Yeah.
So it all has to do with going back to respecting, this may be a leap, but respecting authority.
Well, I think it actually is a biblical leap, because that was one of the things when you look at the book of Ezekiel. I want to say, I need to look at my computer. I want to say it's in Ezekiel 39. Maybe wrong. You can look me up. Anyway, where there's a whole discussion in Ezekiel that, anyway, is dealing with fairness. There's a whole thing about, and it's all dealing with kind of like fairness in regard to blessing in the end time. As weird as that sounds. And so what the Jews thought was that we're going to, back in Ezekiel now, the Old Testament now, okay? Back in Ezekiel, they thought, because we are God's chosen people, therefore God always, to an absolute fault, be fair with us without regard for anybody else. And so when we see anybody else getting God's blessings, that's not fair. And that's actually, it says that inside of the text there. And then there's a whole complaint there about fairness. And Ezekiel brings up God's words. He's just saying what you said. God's the one that decides all this, not you. God is not bound by your limited capacity for understanding what you think is fair and right and not. And it's not dealing with that. And so it's interesting here. I think even from that standpoint, right here, it would surprise me if there is some allusion to that mentality that the Jews also had. He's going to bring it up. He's going to show them again that who's establishing this was not you. In this case, it's the landowner. We know in the bigger situation, it would be God. In this case, it would be Jesus here, but it'd be God establishing everything. And so they have to just kind of go along with it. He's already agreed with them anyways. And what's your problem? I've already agreed to it. I mean, what do you have? So what? It's not, that's what he's saying. It's not really your problem. I agree to out of my own goodness, out of what I have, I've given to you. What are you complaining about?
I also think of the bridesmaids,
Yeah.
and some of them were prepared for the late entry of the bridegroom. The other ones did not prepare for that. Time went by, their lamps grew dim. And here comes the bridegroom, and they ask the ones who were prepared, give us some of your oil.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, no.
Yeah.
Now, is that fair?
Yeah. I think it's fine. I say, if you were prepared, you'd be better off, wouldn't you? I'm going to read this really quick. I've got two more things. I'm going to close it down. I've got like 2 minutes. I'm going to try to rush through it. So the poem that I found. What can I do? The cause of God to aid. Can power so weak as mine forward the great design? Not by young hands or mighty efforts made. Not mighty efforts, but a willing mind. Not strong, but ready hands. The vineyard's Lord demands. For every age, fit labor he will find. Come then in childhood to the vineyard's gate. In you can dress the roots and train the tender shoots. Then why in sloth and sin contented wait? To move the hardened soil, to bend and lift, the fallen branch to tread, the wine press full and red. These need a stronger arm, a nobler gift, but all can aid the work. The little child may gather up weed, or drop some fertile seed, or strew with flowers the path which else were dark and wild. Everyone has and the whole point of that is everyone has a part in working somewhere. That's the whole point. Lastly, I have a synopsis. I want to just read really quick. The parable of the laborers in the vineyard illustrates the principle that everything in the Christian life is by grace from beginning to end. It addresses those who start well in the Christian life but get into trouble later on. And so therefore we see that faith and its continuation of faith is vital. The cause of trouble for the first laborers is they have the wrong attitude. This attitude leads to trouble. They wanted more. They began to murmur and be unhappy. They felt contempt for others and were jealous of latecomers. More seriously, though, they felt the household landowner was unjust. And so the cure is brought in. We recognize that the church is different. Everything is new. We must not bring old mindsets in. Do not think in terms of bargains, right, or rewards. Even rewards are by grace. God doesn't owe us anything. Don't touch records or accounts of your work. Keep your eye on God and his glory. Let God keep the accounts. Be ready for surprises, because God's kind of methods are not like ours. Recognize it is all of grace and rejoice in the fact. And therefore we looking at grace is secret of a happy Christian life. All right, that's all I got. Made it through without coughing. Look at that. Did great. I have congestion. But we're going to stop there. So next week, we'll go into Matthew 21, and we're going to look at verses 28 and 32 for sure. So that's going to be the parable of the two sons. So thank you for being in class today. I appreciate y'all very much, and we'll have worship here in a few minutes.